Welcome to Mic'd Up for Leadership, the podcast that gives you the tools to lead with confidence. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Dresen. I'm joined by my longtime friend, colleague, and fresh from the barber, Jourdan Hilaire. Jourdan, your cut looks nice.
Hey, I appreciate that, Alex. Got to stay fresh, you know. What's up? What's going on, man? It's good to see you.
Yes, it's been a little while, and honestly, I'm doing well. I'm in the midst of day eight of Summerfest. It's a 3 weekend, world's largest music festival in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I'm on a mission to go all 9 days. So I've been the last seven, saw some amazing acts at Sheeran, Post Malone. I can't get into all of them. I don't want to make anyone jealous that's listening, but a lot of good acts and 2 more days to complete the mission.
Absolutely. That sounds like a nice event for a weekend or for a week.
Yeah, so it used to be like 2 weeks straight in Milwaukee, and it used to
Okay.
average
Okay.
almost like a million people. Now they split it up after COVID to 3 weekends in a row of Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So they have like 12
Wow.
different stages going. One like premium stage you have to buy an extra ticket for, but otherwise like just there's always ways to get in for free or discounted tickets if you're you're involved in the Milwaukee community or just kind of in the
Yeah.
know. So yeah, it's just a great place to meet up with friends, run into old friends that you might not have seen in a while, just chat with strangers and see random artists. Like tonight, I might go see Flo Rida. I've never had any interest in going to one of his shows, but like honestly, it could be a lot of fun. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Well, from what I know, I mean, of course, based off of social media and YouTube, Flow Rider definitely brings the energy though. So I'm sure that'll be pretty fun. So it seems like this is definitely a similar event, I guess, Milwaukee's own Coachella like type of atmosphere.
Definitely. Every
Yeah.
every single show has its own unique vibe to it. But yes, it's the big name thing for Milwaukee that they have the
Awesome.
Bonnaroo, all of those different festivals. It's not an overnight thing. It's you come and go. I ride my bike there. It's actually great exercise.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome parking. I literally park my bike and walk right in. So
Absolutely. Okay. Awesome.
awesome. Well, yeah, that's what I have going on this weekend. Jordan, you have any fun events? We're recording over the Fourth of July weekend. You have anything fun going on?
Um. Well, we'll definitely be traveling to go see family. So heading to Shreveport, very soon. So we're definitely excited about that. And other than that, just maybe pop some fireworks, with the nieces and nephews. And also just get a lot of rest, to be honest. This past week was my first week starting my new job, right, as a dean of students at a community college out here. So definitely hit the ground running, but that's a whole nother, conversation episode as well in the future. Maybe we'll do like a, first month recap, right, of my experience in the next few weeks or so. But so other than that, man, just rest and maybe check some emails here and there, tomorrow. So we'll see.
Sure. Major congratulations on that role. I think this is actually the first recording since you've been official with that. So I've known for a little bit, but really excited
Yes.
for you to actually have started and getting your feet wet. But certainly once I think it'd be really valuable to do a 30-day retrospective in a new role and a dean of students role. Obviously, doing really big things in your career, and I'm super supportive and all for all of those. So yeah, happy to almost honestly interview you after those 30 days. Get to
Right.
know your experience. That'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that episode, we have today's episode on our hands, and we are actually going to talk about the idea of feedback. Giving it, getting it, growing from it, and I think the most important thing that I want to start with is just this idea that we are all human, and when we care about something, as much as we want to be open to feedback, we want to share feedback, we know that people's pride is at stake in those conversations. And just there's a level of embarrassment if you're not doing something so well, and even embarrassment if you are doing something well and you don't want that spotlight shine on you. And so it's a challenging thing to navigate, even if you're the most open person in the world. The moment that hits, if it's not that you're the most amazing person in the world, it's going to sting a little bit. And I think just understanding how to navigate the process of feedback is something that we really want to talk through and share some personal experiences. But that's big picture what we're going to be talking about today, Jordan. When I sent over that topic to you, what were your thoughts about feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. When you talked about kind of like a very brief overview of what we're going to be discussing when it comes to the importance of feedback and like you said, the process of maybe, delivering it, right? Or giving that feedback or receiving that feedback. I think about just, the importance of, I think that's why it's important to have those type of experiences. Also have advisors as well, right? If we're thinking of coming through like a student leader lens, right? If sometimes, so for an example, I think I remember one of my first earliest times I received some critical feedback is when I was a student leader. When I was the president of an organization in undergrad, and it was my first year as a president. And the year before that, I was the vice president of this organization. However, and I'm always honest about this, I didn't really do too much as a vice president, right? I just really held that title. We talked about that a little bit, holding a title. However, not necessarily really taking ownership of that title, right? And really doing my best to grow within that position and those responsibilities. Granted, that was one of my first ever probably leadership positions or experiences. So I didn't really have the perspective or the willingness to maybe go above and beyond or even do the job because I wasn't necessarily trained to do so prior to accepting that role. So going into my first year as president, I pretty much did a lot for myself, right? Like I was, whether it's leading the meetings or when we had special events, I was calling the people or communicating on behalf of the whole organization. Essentially, I wasn't delegating any tasks, right? And we also have some strong. A lot of those members were a lot of my friends as well, my peer groups, right? Within the organization that was part of our executive team or just leadership, part of our organization in general. And after I think maybe I don't know how long it was because it was so long ago. After maybe a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months of pretty much me doing everything right instead of including my peers, the organization, etc., organizational members, I should say. Uh, from what I've learned, when I found out that they were very frustrated, right? That they weren't being included, right? And they weren't having opportunity, those experiences to grow and to connect and engage with the other students on campus or the administrators, et cetera, et cetera. Therefore, we had an advisor, right? That was, very involved with us too. They actually set up a meeting with myself and our main executive board, which is maybe about another 4 or 5 individuals, right? With them to have a conversation, but a real talk conversation. And I remember during that time, in that moment, I pretty much didn't say nothing, right? I was instructed to just listen, right? And the members were able to, while of course being facilitated with the advisor, the members, my peer group, right? My peers were able to pretty much share their displeasure a little bit of how I've been leading, right? This particular group. And maybe that went on maybe for about 5-10 minutes or so. The different areas where they would like to see maybe improve on, what they'd like me to do. And honestly, there was a part where it's like, if I don't improve, I'm going to be removed from the position, right? These are actual conversations that happen. But I will say though, of course, in that moment, um, I wouldn't necessarily say it hurt to hear some of those things, but I was embarrassed, like you mentioned, right? I was a little bit embarrassed, right? But also, I think it's also a little bit helpful because I also knew them, right? So I knew their hearts, like my peers, those friends, right? 'Cause I've known them at this point for at least 3 years, right? At this point, so it wasn't a random group of students or members of an organization that's telling me what I can improve on, right? These are legit, pretty much my friends, right? That I've been literally spending the most time around for the last 3 years in college. So, and again, they were respectful, right? I think again, my advisor facilitated, right? So he did a great job of creating a safe space prior to us having a conversation, and it was more of a conversation, right? Which was very helpful as well. And after I received the information, I definitely had to, of course, took me some time to process it. Of course, not necessarily just in that moment, but it took me a few days. But also, of course, having some conversations outside of that meeting with my advisor and some individuals within that particular meeting at the same time, right? So it really helped me out because going into that following year as the president, I was able to practice a lot of. I know, right? I got voted again as to be the president again. I was able to practice a lot of some of that critical feedback that was shared to me about how to improve on my leadership, how to delegate tasks, how to pretty much use your team before you lose your team, right? And we actually had an incredible year going into that year, right? That first year is a little bit rocky. It was still okay, but still a little bit rocky. But going to that second year and throughout that second year of my presidency, we actually had a very strong team. A lot of those members that was there actually returned. Some of them didn't, but they were still around, right, and still supported us in our different events, etc. And and my advisor noticed the growth in me, etc., etc. So I say that to say, I think that whether you are a student leader, giving feedback or receiving feedback, or you're a full-time professional, I think it's very helpful to receive feedback early, but also often as well. I think it's important to one let people that work with you, that you supervise, that you work with closely with as a if you're a president organization, etc. It's important to understand what you're doing really well, but also what are some areas of growth as well, right? Because we're not perfect. You and I have been in this leadership, organizational leadership, higher ed, corporate America leadership space for over what, 13, 14, 15 plus years, right? However, we both, I think I can speak for you when I say this, that I think that we both know we're still not perfect, right? And we never will be. And there's still a lot of areas of improvement, even as professionals where we're at in our lives right now. So I still receive feedback from my supervisor. I receive feedback from you, right? I know that I may give you feedback as well, right? In certain instances. So I really appreciate that time because I always refer back to those experiences when I got that feedback in that moment in that space because it really did help me become the leader that I am today, for sure.
I really appreciate that story because it shows how impactful feedback can be when you accept it, sit with it, and really try to figure out how you can improve yourself. Because from what I'm hearing and just knowing you, Jourdan, right? Like I said this forever, but you cared so much. That's why you were doing everything for the organization. You're trying to. I think as student leaders, especially, we start in some sort of individual contributor role. We're really good at running the errands to plan an event or to be the spotlight person to whatever. Sometimes you might start by leading a meeting, and I think that's a whole conversation about perhaps how our community council structures might be set up, and you throw leaders off the deep end into running a meeting before they've ever really been a leader in any capacity. But we hey, that's future focus. But I think that speaks to like how are we setting up our student leaders for success? How are we proactively creating an environment where we allow people to have those conversations that aren't um, forced and nitpicky, but also are genuinely based on the relationships that have been formed to show that they care and they care about you, and they do have that piece of feedback because it could be just as easy to have that conversation behind someone's back, right? To be able to say, "Oh, this person sucks and they aren't good at this," and just complain and just be frustrated, and not allow that organization or that human to grow in that leadership position. Because when you're
And
in
that
that
might have happened too, you know.
well, that's and it always does, right? Like it's there's
Right,
never
right.
I should say to fester to the point of like only being in that forum. They obviously
Yes,
cared enough to
absolutely,
have that conversation, with the
absolutely.
advisor, and it sounds like was this the advisor's idea to kind of get everyone together?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. I think so. Which goes back to, I talk about, student leaders, right, are the heart of our institutions, but advisors are the shields, right? Advisors have that perspective, they have that experience, they have that emotional intelligence to recognize very quickly that I see there's an issue and let's actually, address it head on, right? Instead of, like you mentioned, let it linger and just a lot more behind the scenes talking, right? About this particular person, about this particular group or etc. But let's get everybody into a room that needs to be in this room. Let's talk it out. So yeah, that's why advisors are very critical in individual students' success and also as a team for sure.
Advisors are so important. I appreciate you had a good advisor, and not that there are advisors that are not good, but just the idea that they knew the importance of that. And I think that's why we're highlighting this idea of feedback because it go when I think back to my student leader experience and just I think as an individual contributor, and even just as I started to take on more leadership type roles, there were times where I thought I was invincible, right? Like I knew what I was doing, I knew where I wanted to go, and it goes back to this idea of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And when you're going together, that does not mean it's your way or the highway. It means you have to figure out from everyone how they're feeling and if they're on board with the direction and how they feel along the way going into that process. So yeah, Jourdan, I think as we grow and as we evolve from a student leadership position to professional position, or just even as a student leader, as you have had more leadership positions under your belt and more leadership experiences, I feel like you start to understand the scope of what it means to be a leader. At the same time, every single time you take on that next larger position, you're in a whole new setting. And even the transition to professional work, you're in a whole new setting of what it means to be a leader at that level, to manage larger tasks and that balance between the two to drive outcomes and yet also be a positive, create a positive experience and culture for your team. And I don't know if you want to speak to that. Not too much about your new job, you're probably still onboarding, but just that transition of any point in time taking the next step in the leadership journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about, like you mentioned, when you're transitioning to different environments, right? Different cultures that's already been established as well, right? There are challenges, right, when it comes to that. And you have to also, I think, recognize early, at least I always speak for myself, I have to recognize early on. And I think I learned this, right, later on, right, as a professional and a leader for others, that regardless of the culture that maybe has already been set, right? The systems that's already been in place, the people that's already in certain positions, right? Where you're now instructed or responsible to help continue to cultivate or maintain, right? Or break down and recreate, right? At times. Um, it's still important to uh, understand the institution, get to know the people that you work with closely, right? It goes back to when I was a student leader, right? I think that feedback helped out. It was, I believe it was easier for my peers to give me the feedback, but it was also for me to maybe accept it and receive it is because I knew them very well, right? So I was comfortable around them. So I think that's why I understand that sometimes you're not always going to get that, right? For an example, I just started a new job. And there might be already some feedback that I need to share with someone that is under my oversight of responsibility, right? I may not know them very well at all, right? Only in my fourth day. However, I think as a leader, you start to learn though how to have those conversations, but also one, that's how those conversations, but how to immediately make them feel comfortable around you, right? And to build that trust early, very early, right? So when it's time to have a conversation, if you see something within the first 2 weeks or the first 2 months, etc., it's not like a complete stranger is telling you something that you can improve on, right? Or things that you're doing well at. You've already connected with them. You already did your best to get to know them, and for them to get to know you a little bit, right? At least early on, to really help kind of, I don't know, diffuse sometimes, that wall that may be up, right? On both ends, right? So I think that's really important to definitely uh, get to know the people that you're working closely with, right? Especially your direct reports at times. Just because I think it makes things easier, or I should say more manageable, when it's time to provide that feedback to that individual. But it's not also about verbal too. But this goes back to, like, I guess, the process of it all, the operation of it all, about having things written down, right? Documentation. But I'll stop sharing that because I know we can go in detail about that. But feel free to share if you have those experience about not just always verbal feedback, but the importance of actually, written documentation, and what does that actually look like. I know it sounds really formal, but sometimes it can be formal depending on the type of conversations you're having too.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think about, and I just, I want to speak broadly about all of my collective experiences in the professional world, right? Higher ed, corporate America, et cetera. And the times that I have. I'm going to go backwards a little bit and to then answer your question. I think the times that I have used my student leadership experience to really practice good leadership, and try to get a positive culture and care and whatnot. I think we would both say that like we have had some really positive experience and created some really positive cultures on the teams we've overseen. At the same time, there are individuals that maybe don't necessarily fit that fully positive narrative of the team, and for them individually, their experience or their performance or whatever that might be, it may be that it's not clicking for them. It may be their personal choices, they're choosing not to care, and that's where the documentation comes in. It may be a skill gap, and we have to try to care about that person. Or it may be that your personal leadership style, and I've learned this about myself, my personal leadership style, the shadow side of my Clifton strengths, come into play where when there's a cleanup effort in mind, right? And there's maybe team members who are not performing at the level we need to, and we have to have conversations, document those conversations, even as simple as an email saying, "Hey, thanks for chatting today. X, Y, Z. We talked about X, Y, Z. I'm excited about our path forward." Whatever that might be. Not getting into like the written warning of it all necessarily, but I know that can also sting because there's, especially in the corporate world, there's this the layoff just culture of it all of trying to find efficiencies, and if you're ever feeling yourself in that slot, I think it can spiral. And I know that for me, I've had that experience for me where I thought I was doing very well, but the manager that I had at a certain time, she and I did not click, and I really try to understand the leadership style, and I promised myself that like whenever I'm in these leadership positions, going back to my student leadership experience, I want everyone to have a positive experience. So there are times where sometimes giving feedback, well, when there's formal opportunities to do it in writing during feedback season and whatnot, if evaluation season, I want to be honest about the experiences and whatnot because we know that's coming. And during general one-on-one meetings and whatnot, I can share feedback, or questions. And I think I try to lead with some questions about, hey, just trying to understand this topic and whatnot. What I found is that outside of those formal times, when I'm moving quickly, I'm an achiever, I'm analytical, and I'm a maximizer, amongst many other things. Ironically, who isn't really helpful in a remote job. We try to use it, but when I'm using those things and when they're in overdrive, when I'm really trying to like help the team succeed and grow, and for us to all accomplish all our deliverables, what I found, and I appreciate getting this feedback, is that I can move too quickly and my communication can move too quickly. And as a result, team members are kind of left with their head spinning, and sometimes that communication lands not as an inquiry just to understand what's going on, and it comes off more as a trying to, like, a fact finding mission, trying to understand the root cause, and like why did you do the thing wrong or something like that. And I will say that my current manager has shaped this idea of feedback beautifully. That feedback is a gift, and sometimes the gift doesn't come with the best wrapping paper, and sometimes you think that it's a scary thing, or weird, or doesn't it feels unsettling. But really, I think in those moments to open yourself up and listen. In fact, I will say, Jordan, that there's been some meetings recently when things just need to slow down for me. I have a sticky note that I wrote down, just the idea of breathe, take it slow, but also I'll physically put my hands out, and they won't see on camera, but I'll just say, like, this is listening time and I'm opening myself up. I don't need to contribute anything, but just listen, because I want to make sure that even if the team feels good, and collecting that feedback on an ongoing basis proactively, but even if the team feels good, if there's an individual on that team that experience for them is an outlier, we need to figure out how to shape your own leadership style and management style to be able to still get the outcomes you need, but to really shape and grow that and nurture that relationship so they can be successful and they can feel part of something. Maybe it's not the larger rah rah team environment that you make, but something that they feel supported in, where they can be successful and heard. So that's a conglomeration of all the different experiences I've had, within feedback and reflecting back on my own style. where I really need to understand how to work together and create a team culture, but understanding that my style doesn't work for everyone. Situational leadership, going back to episode 2 or 3 or whatever it was, you have to understand how to use those different styles and those different strengths and recognize when you're maybe doing too much and need to take a step back and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely, the last thing I'll say is when it comes to situational leadership, very briefly, I've learned that sometimes when you're able to master all of those, right, those strategies, sometimes you can do all of them literally in one day, right? Depending on the situation, the project, the group that you're working with, right? So that's why it's important to definitely, as a student leader, uh, to really get involved, right? And not just like I talked about, not just hold a title, right? But also take ownership of that title, take ownership of those responsibilities, take ownership of and pride in the organization that you're a part of, right? Whether you are president or vice president of the community council or a general member or a senator in SGA, right? Take pride in that, right? And get involved, ask questions, learn from your advisor, learn from the other members, the seasoned student leaders, right? That's been in there for 2 or 3 years in those positions, because the earlier you're able to do that, if those opportunities exist, right, as a freshman, a sophomore, etc., in college, or maybe even high school sometime, right? I think the quicker or the easier, be able to kind of flex those situational management leadership, I should say, and management, right, skills, that it will be easier for you, right, to help you lead your organization when you become kind of like one of the faces of that group of people. So
I like that. I like that a lot. If I were to give one piece of advice, and we've talked about this, but to sum it up is to adopt that growth mindset. You're gonna if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably pretty good at leadership and we're able to master the basics quickly, and so you're ready for new challenges. But every single time you advance in that process, you're going to be met with new challenges that you never understood existed. You can fall back on your foundation of your values and your unique skill sets and Clifton strengths and whatnot, but to keep that growth mindset open and understand that you will receive feedback even if you feel like you're the best of the best leader out there. Even if you are that talented, keep a growth mindset open, welcome feedback, proactively seek that out, and just strive to understand that you'll never reach 100%, but if you keep moving that direction, you can get pretty close. So that hopefully uh, wraps up our conversation, and there's going to be a million parts that we could do to keep diving into different topics of feedback. But I really appreciate the vulnerability, Jourdan, that they've shared, and myself as well, because feedback is a vulnerable thing. We're admitting, someone is admitting that you aren't perfect, and that you have room to grow, and this was your blind spot in some way, that you didn't understand that you were making an impact that made others um, not be at their best. But I think if we all, you know, lead with humility, try to grow, um, we can be the best leaders we can be.
absolutely, I agree.
All right, Jordan. Well, I appreciate both of us finding some time on this holiday weekend to record. It's been a minute, and for everyone out there, it's the summer months. We've got a lot of unique things going on. Jordan's starting a new job. I've got some personal projects going on, and another kickball season coming up. But we'll get to that some other
Here we
time.
go.
All right, right here we go. I've got a squad this year. I'm excited about it. But no, the summer months might be a little.
Championship or bust.
Hey, listen, I don't want to tell the team that, but that's on my mind. So
Right.
yeah, no, I think that we're gonna try to stick to a 2 week format, but the past couple months it's been more of a 3 week, 4 week, and while we're doing some well deserved rest and recovery, we're still planning and plotting on a lot of cool things for mic'd up leadership's directions and guests we can bring on. So stay tuned for a lot of exciting things to come in our world, and yeah, we'll be dropping episodes as often as we can to keep you all informed on the leadership journeys we're both on. But until that next time, my name's Alex.
I'm Jourdan.
We'll see you real soon. Have a great day.